Typically, you know the rules. They start out by saying, well, we are inversely proportional to your height. So the shortest you get, the longest reaches. So that's how the exactly. I thought I would let you all know that I was a professional protocol.
Good afternoon. Welcome here with me and my colleagues. More than 230 Republicans from both chambers of Congress are standing with the American people against President Biden's illegal vaccine mandate on American workers and businesses. Our Congressional Review Act resolution would nullify this overreach by the White House. More importantly, it puts every member of Congress on record. You're either with this type of authoritarian rule or you're against it. Facing growing legal challenges, the Biden administration's OSHA was forced to back down on implementing the rule. This means we're on the right track, but we cannot slow down now. We must continue to work to eliminate this rule once and for all. And what I would like to do now is yield to some of the members that have joined me here today to stand with the American people. And the first person is from Iowa, and it's Congressman Miller Meeks. Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Representative Miller, for organizing today's press conference and for your leadership with Senator Braun on this incredibly important issue. For months, I have said that getting a COVID-19 vaccine should be a choice, not a requirement of employment. I chose to get vaccinated, and I traveled all across the 2nd District of Iowa, attending and administering vaccines to those who wanted them. I also discussed with people the risks, the benefits, and why to be vaccinated. All of us want this pandemic to be over. But businesses across the country are already seeing the real impacts of labor shortages, supply chain issues, and inflation. They do not need the addition of more big government intrusion. The government should provide the resources and information needed to help Americans make an informed decision with their providers that is best for them and their families, not creating new mandates and new labor shortages. Thank you.
Mike Johnson from Louisiana, Vice Chair of the House Republicans. We said from the very beginning that the Biden administration was acting as if it was big government on steroids. And this OSHA mandate is perhaps one of the clearest examples of that. It's the most egregious overreach. I believe, and I've said many times, that the president had to have been given competent legal advice at some point in the process of this, where they told him that what he was doing was unconstitutional. We can only surmise that he decided to do it anyway. That he decided, I guess, that even if it were struck down in the courts, which was almost certain to be ultimately, that they would try it anyway, give it a go, see how much effect they can have. The problem is, with this mandate, not only does it violate the Constitution, as the courts have already indicated, and will ultimately, when it makes its way to the Supreme Court, we expect, but it's affecting real, hardworking Americans. It affects constituents in all of our communities. You're not talking about one particular industry or business. You're talking about all of them, and it's put people in an impossible situation. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals gave the most decisive ruling thus far. That covers my state, Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi. And they described it as fatally flawed and a one-size-fits-all sledgehammer. That's pretty precise language from an appellate court. You know that there were lawsuits pending in all of the federal appellate circuits except the 10th Circuit, and so now they're being consolidated into one. We expect this will be on a rocket docket. We certainly hope to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, while the judicial branch of government is doing its job, we have a job to do here as well. I mean, even though we're in the minority party, we are going to stand for the rights of conscience, for medical freedom, and the fundamental liberties that every American enjoys. This legislation is an important step in that regard. I'm grateful to my colleague, Mr. Keller, for doing it, and all of our colleagues who are standing with us today. With that, I'll yield back.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Scott Franklin from Central Florida, Florida 15. Well, here we are again, taking exception to another gross overreach by the Biden administration. Thank you, Representative Keller, for your leadership on this vaccine mandate issue. Just to be clear, I'm not opposed to the vaccine. It's saved countless lives, and it's enabled us to turn the corner on COVID-19. Given my personal circumstances, I weighed the risk and the benefit, and I decided to get the shot. But for others, I also respect their right to consult with their doctors and do what's best for them. I've met with dozens of businesses back home in my district in Central Florida, and not a single one of them supports this Biden mandate. It puts them in an impossible situation with their employees at a time we need everyone back to work. Many told me that if it's not rescinded, it could literally put them out of business. I also have an example of one employer with 124 employees who's directly across the street from a competitor with 87 employees. What do you think is going to happen when he has to lay off 20% of his workforce? We're just going to go right across the street and go to work for his employer. It makes absolutely no sense. I consider it a blessing every day that I hail from the free state of Florida. Just last night, the Florida legislature passed House Bill 1, which blocks the Biden administration's vaccine or test mandate. It does so by offering a package of common sense exceptions like medical or religious exemptions, existing immunity, and others. Just a little while ago, Governor Ron DeSantis wrapped up a press conference in Brandon, Florida, part of the district I'm proud to represent. I'm really sorry I couldn't have been there, but I promise you the irony on the choice of locations wasn't lost on any of us who are sick and tired of the policies that continue to spew forward from the Biden administration. To my folks back home, I just say, let's go, Brandon.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Rick Allen. I represent the 12th District of Georgia. I want to thank Representative Keller for leading this effort, having me here today to help serve as a voice for over 80 million American workers who will be impacted by Biden's unprecedented and likely unconstitutional vaccine mandate in private places. We're here to fight for the employees and employers who have been eager to return to work after months of forced shutdowns and pandemic-related closures. And for the families whose wallets are feeling the impacts of rising prices and surging inflation as they work to put a meal on their kitchen table. But because of Biden's workplace vaccine mandate, they are weighing a decision that no one should ever have to make. Lose your job or fall in line with what the government mandates. And what happens if businesses don't comply? Employers will get slapped with fines as much as $14,000 per violation. The Biden administration should be ashamed. Every American has the right to earn a living. This isn't about public safety. We've seen the goalposts continue to move over the last 20 months. It's about government control. As litigation over this rule continues in the courts, I'm glad to see that OSHA has temporarily suspended its implementation and planned enforcement. But we must also fight this legislatively, and that's why we're here today. That's why I'm proud to join all 50 Republican senators and over 160 House members in using our authority under the Congressional Review Act to block this rule from taking effect. We must fight for American workers, businesses, and an economy by ensuring that this mandate never sees the light today. And with that, I yield back.
I'm Kevin Hearn from Oklahoma's 1st Congressional District, and I'd like to thank my friend and colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Keller, for leading this charge on the Congressional Review Act. It's never been more important to stand up, speak out, and fight back against federal overreach. Less than a year into Biden's presidency, our economy is in shambles. Our supply chain is strained to the breaking point and inflation is out of control. At the heart of all these problems is a labor shortage. It's devastating. Biden's unconstitutional vaccine mandate has only exacerbated that shortage, especially harmful to our healthcare and public safety sectors and crushing our local job creators. Following overwhelming backlash and multiple lawsuits, OSHA suspended enforcement of Biden's immoral and unconstitutional mandate this week. But the alarming truth is that they knew all along this would be the result. They knew it was wrong, they knew it was illegal, but they did it anyway. The Biden administration and his puppeteers caved to scores of political points with the socialist mob. It's clear that the allegiance is not to the Constitution of the United States of America. This victory belongs to every American who raised their voice and fought back against this mandate. But our fight is not over. We will use the Congressional Review Act to ensure this mandate is not just suspended, but scrubbed from the Department of Labor entirely, and verify that no future government can impose such dangerous and legal policies on the American people again. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative John Joyce from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I thank my colleague, Representative Fred Keller, for convening this. We're here today to talk about President Biden's crippling vaccine mandate that will harm all American businesses. As a doctor, I can tell you that forcing mandates on the American people is not a responsible approach to public health. The federal government should never be in the position of telling Americans what they should put into their bodies. This week, I spoke with a pharmacist from my district, Dave Shetter, the owner of McDonald's Pharmacy in Fulton County. Dave told me that this mandate will directly harm his ability to get to the patients the medicines that they need. A mandate that is harming patients receiving their medicines. His words were very simple. Dave Shetter said, "This mandate defies logic." From hindering the ability of pharmacies to distribute medication to impacting the national supply chain, the cascading effect of this mandate will be felt across our entire economy. This decision that forces Americans to consult with their shift manager as opposed to their physician or their pharmacist, and not allow their healthcare decisions to be made in a clear conscience with the independence that our Constitution guarantees. This only erodes the safe and effective vaccines that have been developed by President Trump under Operation Warp Speed. We cannot deputize business owners to be the vaccine police in our country. That is why I am proud to be joining my colleagues today in co-sponsoring the Congressional Review Act resolution to nullify President Biden's unconstitutional mandate. The COVID-19 pandemic will not be ended with fear-mongering or with bullying. We're here to protect lives. We're here not to control lives. Dave Shetter, the pharmacist in Pennsylvania, is correct. This mandate defies logic. Thank you, and I yield.
Well, good afternoon. My colleagues and I are here today to protect the American dream from Biden's socialist nightmare. This administration and its radical policies present a greater threat to American businesses, industry, and workers more than any time in modern history. If their socialist economic policies weren't bad enough, this administration is pushing for a heavy-handed crackdown on American businesses through their federal vaccine mandate. We know this Biden vaccine mandate will crush small and medium-sized businesses with thousands of dollars in fines and will cause workers to lose jobs, opportunities, and critical income for their family. I thank the Fifth Circuit Court for their work to date in helping stop it. But that's all the more reason why I am proud to join my colleagues today in support of the introduction of the Congressional Review Act to put an important check on the power and gross overreach of this administration and its federal executive actions. This vaccine mandate is unconstitutional, it's dangerous, and it is misguided. My Republican colleagues and I will use every tool at our disposal to stop this administration from implementing their radical policies, which will inevitably hurt American families, workers, and businesses. And just to put a point on this, about 1 in 25 people in America today are here illegally. Let that sink in. This administration, this week, under the Democrat-controlled Congress, wants to give amnesty to millions of illegals and handouts through government social programs while firing 80 million Americans before the holiday season with this mandate. It is unconscionable, it is un-American, and it will not stand. Thank you to Senator Braun and Congressman Keller for your leadership in this important fight for our freedom. With that, I yield.
Thank you. I guess being not the first speaker here, that gave me time to reread the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration of Independence, we talk about all the complaints that our forefathers had against the King of England and all the impositions he was imposing on our voters. None of those impositions was anywhere near as strong as requiring citizens to get a vaccination that is, well, regardless of what the vaccination is, to put something in your body against your will. It's just the act of a tyrant. In a related move, his government tried to require people who work in hospitals to get vaccinated. And I know people in these hospitals, usually 40% of the people in the medical field did not want to get the vax. Okay, when I talk to the administrators, they'll tell me behind the scenes, so you know, about 60% of our people are vaccinated, 40% are medical people. I hear from doctors and nurses saying, please, what can you do? I don't want to be vaccinated. These people know a hell of a lot more about their health than Dr. Biden over there, who thinks he's such a know-it-all with all this money he gets from all of the pharmaceuticals. In any event, I hope the press does a little better job of waking up. I'm not going to be your expert, of finding experts who don't want this vaccine, because a lot of them, they're pretty damn well informed. And to tell them that they've got to put a chemical in their body against their will. I mean, right offhand, I almost can't think of a greater imposition of freedom that our citizens have to endure since this country was founded. So I'm glad we have this resolution here today, but I hope the press wakes up and begins to speak up for freedom a little bit here and quote, they take them off the internet as quickly as they go on, but find some of these well-informed people who are, with a great deal of thought, not taking the vaccine, and wonder, can we be a free country if we're going to try to do this? Thanks.
Thank you. It's always great to follow Congressman Rothman, who's an expert on the Constitution, but I want to say thank you again to Representative Keller and Senator Braun for doing this. Obviously, this is a huge issue, an overreach of government, a mandate that's not, we believe is unconstitutional. I support the Congressional Review Act. I also have two bills that would also cover this, the Health Freedom for All Act and the Employment Freedom for All Act. I'm an employer in upstate New York. Our business is celebrating its 75th year. Thankfully, we have less than 100 employees. We're still desperate to find people to come and work for us, and had this vaccine mandate applied to us, I point out an equal protection issue. The people across the road, the company with 101 employees must comply with the vaccine mandate and are struggling. So there's so many things wrong with this. But I want to give you just a real example of what happened even before this mandate went into play. I had a woman reach out to me, a young woman having her first child. She was pregnant, very healthy, not opposed to the vaccine, but her doctor recommended that she not take the vaccine because there had been some underlying issues with her family. The baby was due September 16th. She was told by her employer that if she did not have the vaccine by September 2nd, she would be terminated. She ended up she accepted the termination. She was given no options for any kind of waiver. On September 4th, just 2 days after the mandate went into place, this is a self-imposed mandate by the employer. She had a beautiful baby boy, is not opposed to the vaccine, but now she's terminated from her employment and has been told she can't come back. She was also required to sign, if she were to get the vaccine, a non-disclosure agreement, meaning she could not work for another business. That's why I put out the Employment Freedom for All Act, to prevent this kind of leverage being used by employers. This is a time when we need people to get back to work. This vaccine is unconstitutional. I support my colleagues. I echo their sentiments, but there are real life stories out there. We have countries that have sometimes an 80 or 90% vaccination rate, but are now in lockdown because people who have been vaccinated are getting the virus, including people in my own family who have been double vaxxed, who are still getting COVID. This is not a requirement to have a mandate. It's ridiculous that the president thinks that he can stand in the place of people and their physicians. I support waivers. I support natural immunity. We have doctors standing behind us who are going to tell you all the reasons that this vaccine mandate is wrong-headed, and I think the American people are going to become united around this issue, and I hope they do, and I support this Congressional Review Act. I hope the Democrats will join us and realize this is where the American public is, and I thank again the sponsors of this legislation and hope that we can get this passed. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Buddy Carter from Georgia, and the last time Joe Biden was in the White House, he was vice president, and at that time he was trying to take our private health insurance from us. Now that he's president, he's even more sinister. Now he's trying to take our health care decisions from us. Folks, as you know, I'm a pharmacist. And as a pharmacist, I believe in the vaccine. I'm an advocate for the vaccine. Went through the clinical trials, had my booster shot, have everything. And I think vaccines are the most life-saving innovations in the history of medicine. However, I disagree adamantly with mandating vaccines. The decision on whether you get a vaccine is between you and your doctor, between you and your pharmacist, you and your family, not between you and the government. Joe Biden does not know what's best for your health care. You need to consult with your doctor. You need to consult with your pharmacist and make that decision based on your facts and findings. That's why it's so very important. And you know, aside from that, and Claudia just mentioned it, we're asking the wrong question here. As a pharmacist, I had to ask questions quite often. I was always told it's important to ask the right questions. We're asking, are you vaccinated? Well, we should be asking, do you have immunity? That's the question. This mandate is unconstitutional. It's un-American. It needs to stop. I applaud the Fifth Circuit for their decision. I applaud OSHA for stopping the enforcement of this. And I applaud Representative Keller for his legislation. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor. Folks, this is unconstitutional. It's un-American. It needs to stop.
I'm Virginia Fox. I represent North Carolina's 5th District. I'm the lead Republican on the Education and Labor Committee. OSHA is in our committee. We're all solidly behind this CRA. We believe that this mandate that the President has put out is unconstitutional and that it will ultimately be struck down. We see nowhere that OSHA has the right to do this. But what you are seeing is that the Democrats' thirst for power is insatiable. Absolutely insatiable. Telling businesses in the middle of an extraordinary labor shortage that they're going to have to fire some of their loyal workers is the height of stupidity. And you've heard examples from my colleagues here today. Job creators have enough on their plates right now and should not be President Biden's vaccine and testing police. He wants to change fundamentally the role of employer and employee. Crushing job creators with illegal regulations will keep our economy from recovering. And it almost seems as though that's what the Democrats are bent on doing. Our country doesn't need more crippling mandates. It needs more opportunities for workers. Yet just as many Americans are ready to re-enter the workforce, President Biden slamming the door in their face. It is clear that President Biden and the Democrats in the Congress are going to continue to use this pandemic to put as many Americans as possible under the thumb of the federal government. We are going to fight that at every point. It's up to the American people and their representatives in Congress to resist the Biden administration's power grab and cling to the freedoms that we hold dear.
Wanted to thank Representative Keller for bringing the bill forward, and just briefly wanted to highlight, I'm a member of the Small Business Committee, and this week we had the administrator in, and the topic of the vaccine came up, and the hypocrisy in and around this issue continues. When I asked directly about the 100 number and where that was chosen from, she basically admitted it was picked out of the air. We then find out hours later that there was a negotiation with the labor unions throughout the nation, and that there was an exodus of unionized members to non-union shops. And that's why this item is specifically part of the mandate that was offered by the Biden administration. I mean, they told us at the beginning of the pandemic, they lectured us, follow the science, follow the science. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, this was all about the unions and I'm so glad that it's now been at least halted for a short period of time. So it's good to be with you. Thank you, Representative Keller.
Good afternoon. Chris Jacobs from the 27th Congressional District in New York. I want to thank Congressman Keller for his leadership on this very, very important issue. It's great to be here to join my colleagues on discussing this critically important issue facing our economy and our personal freedoms. The President's vaccine mandates this mandate is a vast overreach of his authority. Not only is this an affront to the right of every American to make the best medical decision for themselves and their family, but it will have a vast negative consequence on our economic recovery and our national security. My district is home to numerous businesses and defense contractors who supply our nation's military, families, farmers with critical supplies. Because of the President's mandates, hardworking Americans will lose their jobs and businesses will lose employees who perform vital functions. Forcing Americans off the job is wrong and counterproductive. We know how to make workplaces safe. We should continue those efforts and allow hardworking Americans in small businesses, defense, healthcare, and critical government agencies to retain their medical freedom and their livelihoods. I am proud to join this effort and halt the President's overreach, and I will continue to protect the freedom of hardworking Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. My name's Tim Burchett, 2 T's, Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District. I want to thank my friend Representative Keller for putting this together. You know, for the last 20 months, we've called these folks heroes. You know, there's been comic books about them, there's billboards, there's signs up, thank you, heroes. Now, how does Joe Biden repay these folks? He's trying to have them fired for disobeying his orders. Biden's vaccine mandate, it's an un-American power grab, and this administration is sick for thinking it can threaten workers who choose not to get vaccinated. I would call it the utmost arrogance of anybody I've ever seen. Americans get to decide for themselves, dadgummit, on getting vaccinated. Government threats are not part of making that decision. We're here to stand up to the tyranny of the Biden administration and his bureaucrats who need to get out of their offices and find out what's going on in this country. And I'm thankful for Representative Keller's Congressional Review Act to overturn Biden's vaccine mandate. As many of us up here all have legislation, and I'm no different, and I don't know where they come up with these names because I could probably do better. I think my 14-year-old daughter could probably come up with a better name, but I'm sponsoring legislation with Senator Marsha Blackburn to keep our COVID-19 Heroes Employed Act. And our bill would exempt certain employees from the vaccine mandates. The good news is, as of yesterday, Biden's vaccine mandate's on hold. Bad news, he will continue this attack on unvaccinated Americans again. And he's also issued a warning to everybody, just tell them to ignore the court orders and go ahead and do it. So, of course, when he does that, we're going to be ready. We'll have Representative Keller's Congressional Review Act in my legislation in waiting. We will defend Americans from Biden's next attack on the unvaccinated folks. Appreciate y'all allowing me to be here. And thank y'all for saving the best for last. Thank you.
It's not over. He doesn't know that more are coming behind us here, I guess. But, thank you for being here today. Bob Good from Virginia's 5th District. This Congressional Review Act resolution is Congress rightfully reasserting its constitutional authority and rightfully holding this lawless administration accountable. This administration and this Democrat majority has contempt for the Constitution. At best, it's a minor inconvenience to be disregarded as they advance their radical agenda. This president lied to the American people a year ago and said that he would not implement a vaccine mandate in order to get elected. He made that statement and lied about that. Then after he gets elected, he accidentally tells the truth and admits he doesn't have the authority to do this under the Constitution. And then we see him do it anyway. Thank God for the courts that are putting a stay on this. It's temporarily being suspended. This is the #1 issue facing America. There's not another issue that threatens the lives and livelihoods of literally tens of millions of Americans, assaulting our freedoms in ways that we couldn't have imagined even just a year ago. Our personal freedoms, our own body, our health decisions, our ability to assemble and to worship and to go to work and operate our business is under assault from this administration. I'm calling on our own governor-elect here in Virginia, newly elected, to declare that he will do everything within his power on January 15th to ensure that Virginia is a vaccine mandate-free state. In the meantime, I thank my friend Fred Keller and our colleagues for leading this effort to again reassert Congress's rightful constitutional authority and stand for the rights of all Americans.
Thank you. Mary Miller here from the Illinois 15. Thank you, Representative Keller, for hosting this. The Fifth Circuit blocking OSHA's COVID vaccine mandate is a huge win for the American people. Certainly, we aren't expecting Biden and the far left to give up on their power grab without a fight. But as you could tell, my colleagues and I are here to engage the fight in a greater way. This vaccine mandate is going to destroy what's left of our economy, and in addition, it's going to cause Americans to be less safe by making police officers, firefighters, Navy SEALs, doctors, nurses, and the good people involved in moving our supply chain along to choose between a vaccine mandate, taking the jab, or their job. The Biden administration is seeking to weaponize OSHA against the American people. They want to ruin the lives of the American people right during the holidays by using OSHA to fire millions of Americans from good-paying jobs. Is that building back better? Is that healing the soul of the nation? Biden and Harris promised to be moderates and to govern in the middle. We can now see those are blatant lies. They said there would be no vaccine mandate. They said they would crush the virus, but not the economy. They said they wouldn't put kids in cages at the border. Those were the core promises of Biden and Harris. Every single one of them was a lie. Where is the media to point out these lies? The mainstream media seems to have amnesia. And you know, I never use bad language, but I do say, let's go Brandon, because Grandma has said it, it's now mainstream, because this is what it means. It stands for the media covering for President Biden. They did it during the election, that's why we have them, and they're continuing to do that. Natural immunity is also completely ignored, because natural immunity doesn't have a lobbyist here in DC. You know, I can tell you, I recently learned of a story. There's a Chinese student here at a local university in my district. She had recently recovered from COVID, and her doctor recommended to her that she doesn't take the vaccine. The university was fining her $150 a week. She completely under duress, she went and took that vaccine. Within a couple hours, she's in intensive care, fighting for her life. Okay, she did survive, but she's still at home recovering from this. Where is the ability for people to choose for themselves? We're not robots here, we're individuals. We have our own unique bodies and situations and healthcare situations. Americans have the God-given right to the pursuit of happiness, and we are not going to bow to King Biden or to his edicts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Jay Obernolte. I represent California's 8th Congressional District. I am very proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation. I'd like to thank Congressman Keller for his leadership on this issue. To be clear, I am very pro-vaccine. I believe the vaccine is effective. I believe most people should get the vaccine. I've been vaccinated, my family's been vaccinated. I have encouraged my constituents to get vaccinated. But I am very strongly opposed to mandating that anyone get the vaccine. And I'm firmly convinced it is unconstitutional to require people to inject something into their bodies at the price of losing their job. I've run a small business for over 30 years, and I know the hardship that this is going to cause on America's small businesses. And regardless of what you feel about the constitutionality of what OSHA is trying to do here, think about this. Inflation is running at the highest levels in over 40 years, and it's causing real impacts on the people that we represent. In my district, it costs over $20 more today to fill the tank of a car with gasoline just to go to work than it did just a year ago. The price of all our everyday commodities are up, and Thanksgiving dinner next week is going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving dinner in the history of our country. This is only going to get worse if OSHA is allowed to promulgate this regulation. Economists will tell you that inflation is caused by an imbalance between supply and demand. Even OSHA's own documents admit this is going to require a large number of companies to lay off or fire a large number of people. That's going to further disrupt supply, which is going to make inflation even worse. It's going to have a real material impact on all Americans, but particularly the most economically vulnerable Americans. Now, the action that we're taking today is very appropriate, and it's one that the Congressional Review Act gives Congress the power to take. It's when Congress has a serious concern about an action taken by the administration, Congress reserves the right to step in and say, we do not believe that that is correct. And that's what we're doing today. This bill has over 160 co-sponsors. It deserves to get a hearing, and it deserves to be passed. So I want to thank you for your support of this legislation and for Congressman Keller for his leadership.
Good afternoon on this nice, bright, sunshiny day. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you, Representative Keller. And I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, but I'm going to take this from a different angle, because you've heard about all of the inflation. You've heard about all of the statistics. I'm going to take this from a human element. We're heading into one of the greatest holidays, Thanksgiving, where we need to be thankful. And I want to share with the constituents of the 10th District, the people of my state, and the people of America, I've heard you. I've listened to you on your town halls, I've read your emails, and I've taken your calls. And I thank you for your voice. And I want to share with you, your voice is getting heard today. And this is why we are fighting against these mandates. I'm thankful for the healthcare workers, for the frontline agents, for our doctors, our nurses, our police officers. And you know what? I think the bulk of America thank them as well. It's about time when we see a frontline worker, a doctor, a nurse, we don't ridicule them. We actually say thank you for running into danger when everyone else is running out. And you know the other thing that I'm most thankful for? And this is the thing that allows people to come to this country on boats. And this is the other reason why you don't see a lot of people wanting to get out of America, but you see a lot of people getting into America. It's because we're thankful for that document called the Constitution. And I would suggest that our president and this administration read that document that has stood strong for so many years, that he took the oath to uphold. Yet he sits on those steps and stands on those steps right behind me and says, I know this is unconstitutional, but I'm gonna do it anyways. Shame on you, President Biden. Shame on this administration. And I would offer that perhaps you should go back to school and get a lesson in the Constitution, because that is the oath that you stood to uphold, and shame on you for not upholding it. I applaud the circuit court, I applaud my colleagues, and most of all, I applaud the American people for not being bullied by the far left communist people who live in this country. God bless the Constitution, God bless the frontline workers, and God bless America. God bless America.
Morgan Griffith, Commonwealth of Virginia, 9th District. We should respect the rights of people to work and the rights of people to make their own health care decisions. Now the constituents that I represent in Virginia's 9th, they just want to work. And for decades, my constituents have complained that businesses are overregulated. And now the Biden bureaucracy wants to overregulate the people of the United States. It's not just the businesses they're regulating, it's overregulation of the people of the United States. What are they going to do next? If this is allowed to stand, will they be telling us what we can and cannot eat for lunch because it may or may not be healthy according to the federal government. I yield back.
Good afternoon. Doug Lamel from 1st District of California. Let's review for a moment here. So at the height of the COVID situation, President Trump pushed forward Operation Warp Speed to try and help develop vaccines that could be helpful for people, right? So they developed them, and what we heard at the time was Kamala Harris saying things like, well, if it's a Trump vaccine, I don't know if I'm going to trust it. We had Governor Newsom in California say like, well, if it's a Trump vaccine, we're going to have to test it on our own first. But magically the election happened, Biden got in, and so that all goes away. As we heard, Biden promised, oh, we're not going to make anybody take the vaccine, it's going to be voluntary. As recently this last summer, he and Jen Psaki are out there saying, oh, that this would be an overreach for us. Well, guess what? Now they tell us, well, we're getting impatient for people not doing it as fast as they wish. Isn't that outrageous? Isn't that arrogant? So, they're pushed forward, but so far they've been using others to do the dirty work to keep their fingerprints off of it. They get the airline CEOs, they get other big company CEOs to mandate it within, saying, nope, it's not us. They have the right to do that as big business. In the meantime, I'm sure they're haranguing them in the background in order to keep COVID money coming or other contracts or permits coming, right? So here we are. They've actually thrown down the gauntlet. They're using OSHA to do their dirty work now for businesses 100 and over. And for the violation of not making those employees do it, $13,000 fine. Isn't that something? Think of the businesses that are already struggling. Think of the amount of unemployment there is out there, open jobs, because people aren't filling them. Either we're giving away too much money in Washington, or they're afraid to go back to work because they might be fired from their job. So what in the world is going on? We have the arrogance of this administration telling people what to inject in themselves, and it's highly dangerous. I had a telephone town hall meeting last night. It's overwhelming. The people in my district in Northern California, some might want to take the vaccine, some may not, but they sure don't want to be forced by a government to do it. Now, why is it now, a news bit today, the FDA is asking a court in order to keep the data sealed for 55 years from now of the Pfizer vaccine data. What is that about? That goes well past even the patent timeline for a vaccine for a patented product. What are they trying to hide for 55 years at the FDA? This is a trust issue. People do not trust their government. They don't trust Fauci, they don't trust the CDC, they don't trust what's coming out of this administration. So to continue to have these heavy-handed things coming down is just further eroding people's ability to trust their government. So let's get people back to work. We talk about supply chain issues. We don't have people that can fill the jobs. So being told to either choose between taking an injection you don't want or going back to work. We have the remedy seems to be around here using National Guard troops to stand in hospital rooms, evidently, and provide. What is a patient supposed to do these days when they get short on attention? They yell, medic, to get a National Guard troop to come down the hall and look, pay attention to them? Because our frontline workers that we've been calling heroes for the year and a half, now we're being treated like goats? What about our school teachers? What about students under the age of 18, under the age of 13, now being forced into this? What kind of arrogance? This is scaring parents all over, either into doing something they don't want to do for their kid or not sending their kid to school anymore. It sure is great for the homeschooling industry. So I'm glad that we have here today the Fifth Circuit Court telling OSHA to back off, and that we have this CRA ability here that my colleague Mr. Keller has put together for us. And what this will do, it'll put everybody that works in that house there on record as how they feel about this mandate, how they feel about giving people their own choices or forcing them into something that's harmful for their kids, for their jobs, for their well-being. We'll find out here pretty soon. I'm proud to be part of this CRA. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you, Congressman Keller, for your leadership on this imperative issue of standing against vaccine mandates and standing for individual freedom by introducing this Congressional Review Act. I'm Andrew Clyde from the northern part of Georgia in their 9th district. At the start of the pandemic, Democrat leaders parched for power saw a golden opportunity to take control of Americans' lives and livelihoods. Businesses shuttered, in-person learning abruptly ended, and our economy suffered dearly. Thanks to the Trump administration's leadership, Operation Warp Speed
ushered a vaccine in record time to help combat the spread of the virus, while respecting Americans' freedoms to choose whether they get vaccinated or not. But now, drunk on power, Democrats are forcing Uncle Sam to make that medical decision for millions of Americans. Biden's sweeping vaccine mandate would force over 80 million Americans to take the COVID-19 vaccine, impose $14,000 fines for employees that do not comply, and push out first responder heroes, yes, first responder heroes, who keep our communities safe and further increase the number of unemployed Americans when we should be incentivizing folks to get back to work. Let me give you a local example. I was contacted by a nurse from a local hospital system, and he said, what am I going to do? I am the sole income for my family. I have 7 children, and yet 27% of our hospital system is not vaccinated. But it's not about whether you're immune, it's about whether you're vaccinated or not. And I am being forced to decide by December the 5th whether or not I can keep my job. That is wrong. And it's because Medicare and Medicaid are threatening these particular healthcare systems that if they don't have their employees 100% vaccinated, they will withhold payments. That is wrong. That is 100% wrong. That is unconstitutional, President Biden. One must ask, will the left ever quench their thirst to expand and tighten the federal government's grip on the lives of the American people? The clear answer is obviously not. And while the legal challenges are ongoing, I am proud to join my conservative colleagues in continuing to fight back against President Biden's frightening display of government overreach and medical tyranny. I say no to the vaccine mandate, not on my watch, not now, and not ever. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Keller, for bringing up this Congressional Review Act. We need to do more of this. I just want to make it clear for the record that I received the vaccination. I had a conversation with my doctor. It was my decision. But we're here today to assert the same rights and liberties that I exercised in making a personal decision that are now being taken away or attempted to be taken away by the Biden administration. The president, whose approval rating hit a new low this morning of 36%. The federal government has been using the public health crisis to gain more and more control over our lives. I know the pandemic is dangerous. I know any healthcare emergency is dangerous, but I want to tell you something that I hope the American people understand. What's taking place right now in America is even more dangerous. Giving up your freedom, giving up your ability to work, to raise your families according to the dictates of your conscience and your faith, are not to be forfeited because someone has decided that every person will knuckle under to whatever the federal government says. And again, a president who has a 36% approval rating. Their overreach over the past 20 months is totally unacceptable. And this vaccine mandate for healthcare workers indicates that they do not intend to stop. Can you imagine having a loved one, a grandparent, a mom or dad having a stroke or heart attack, and you need to get them to the hospital, but they don't have the personnel because those people have been denied the ability to work in the emergency room, to operate an ambulance. You talk about other people losing their lives. That has nothing to do with being infected with the COVID virus. It's because government has infected the entire system with overreach. It's unconscionable that an agency of unelected bureaucrats would force our frontline workers to choose between their jobs and either a vaccine or a burdensome and complicated testing regimen. And I want to emphasize unelected bureaucrats. That's the swamp, folks. That's the people who try to run this place. They're trying to do this all outside your elected representatives. What's at stake, and I want to emphasize again, is our form of government, representative government, where those of us who stand behind this podium are responsible to the people at home, not these nameless, faceless bureaucrats who are making these decisions. This undermines our efforts to get our economy back on track, to get the supply chain operating again the way it should be. It undermines the ability to get people back to work. We're driving people out of the workforce, and they're threatening the fines of $13,000 per violation. Maybe this is their plan all along, was to find enough people that they can make up part of this massive deficit that they've created with Build Back Better. I want to remind you that these are the same people who stood by last year when Democrat governors condemned thousands of elderly people to be placed into COVID-infected nursing homes to die. Where's the accountability for that? We have an opportunity as Congress to counter this kind of abuse of agency authority with this Congressional Review Act. We're here now to say that we're not going to stand by and do nothing. The American people are letting their views be known, again, because if you look at the approval rating of this administration, it's clear the American people don't agree with what's being done. My colleagues, Republican colleagues, and I are going to stand up for the American people. We're going to fight alongside them against this and any other unconstitutional actions from the Biden administration. It's unfortunate that the Biden administration need reminding our fundamental rights do not take a back seat during a crisis. We have always prided ourselves as American people to rise to the occasion together. That's not what's happening now. And we will do everything that we can to protect our rights, to allow the American people to live the life that they want to live, make their own decisions, and we'll stand with them. Thank you. I yield back.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Joe Wilson. I represent the Midlands of South Carolina, and I'm very grateful for the leadership of Fred Keller today. The Biden-Harris administration is not connected to reality. We see this with the energy policies they have that have resulted in high gas prices, which are just catastrophic, and also to have the consequence of Mr. Biden actually calling on President Putin for Russia to produce more. That's inconceivable. Then we have, of course, inflation. Next week we'll have the most expensive Thanksgiving in the history of the United States. And then we have Build Back bankrupt, which will increase inflation even more, affecting American families. And then in regard to the mask mandate, it's not real what they've done. I've had real business people tell me they have just over 100 employees, and they have their employees who are quitting to work for companies that have less than 100 employees. These are trained people. These are dedicated people. They're longtime employees, but the consequence is that it will be the consequence of destroying small businesses. And so I'm also grateful in South Carolina that with Governor Henry McMaster, with Attorney General Alan Wilson, we have had a number of lawsuits that I think will be successful. And then Gary Palmer amazingly is correct, and that is the American people know better. On Tuesday, for the first time in 40 years, the Republicans were electing a mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. And we know it was a national election because on Monday, President Barack Obama made phone calls on behalf of the Democratic nominee. I made calls on behalf of the Republican nominee, and he still won. So anyway, the bottom line, I wish you all well, and I want to thank Fred for his leadership.
Thank you very much. I'm Roger Williams. I represent District 25 in the great state of Texas. And I see this firsthand. I'm an employer. I employ hundreds of people back in Texas. And I can tell you what a disaster this is. And how about the business that's at 99? He doesn't want to go to 100. He doesn't want to expand. He doesn't want to grow. It hurts the economy. The Biden administration has taken another step in their socialist takeover. It's very simple. The federal government has no authority to force private employers to comply with such tyrannical requirements. This is a gross violation of Americans' rights and individual liberties, and I am proud to join also my colleagues here today to oppose President Biden's unconstitutional vaccine mandate. I came to Congress as a businessman to fight for Main Street America because that's what I am. And this mandate will cause small businesses to lose more employees when we're already experiencing a labor shortage. Our healthcare heroes who are on the front lines battling COVID will now be forced to leave their professions, as we've talked about, because of this mandate.
This is not the way we repay them for their tireless efforts to fight COVID and keep America strong. 59% of Border Patrol agents around the Texas border, where I'm from, who are working every day to secure the border and protect communities, could be let go because of this mandate. This will only worsen the Biden border crisis, which is a total disaster as we speak. This vaccine mandate is a recipe for even more failure and will add to President Biden's economic disaster we see unfolding every day, and he may even set a record and drop below 30% before it's over with. We must stop this overreach of authority by the federal government and protect the individual freedoms of all Americans and small businesses. This is the greatest country in the world. Let's keep it that way. God bless America.
I thank my colleagues for joining me today for this important event, Standing with the American People, and I thank everybody for taking the time to participate and join us. God bless America.
Congratulations.